Another true video within the same week. You're probably asking, what's up with that? Um, Today I'm finally recording the sexual assault victims in fiction rhetorical study that I've been working on. I've been working on it for a while. I just keep putting it into the side because I don't even know. Um, but I'll finally be talking about this. This one I've kind of had on the shelf for a long time. If you watched my first rhetorical analysis on this video or on the channel, I analyze Anthony Fantano's critique of DJ Academics for some stuff he did on stream with a minor. Mm, that was for a school project. My original idea for the school project, um, we did 3 school projects. So that was the first one. The second and third one both correlated with the Iranian government suppressing metal and hip hop artists for making rebellious and revolutionize music. Um, but at the beginning of that semester in that class, we wrote down ideas. This was one of the first ideas I had. I just didn't really know how to approach it at first, um, because I would have to pull a bunch of evidence from TikTok comments, Reddit comments, which I couldn't really find any. Um, but I know they're in the internet, and if you are fans of these shows, I know you know they're there too. Anyway, let's just get right into it. So in fiction, sexual assault is often treated as a narrative device to shock audience, deepen character trauma, push their story, character development, or justify revenge arcs in some cases. This rhetorical study focuses on several characters across manga, comics, television, who experience assault. These characters are Denji from Chainsaw Man, Mark Grayson from Invincible, Hughie Campbell from The Boys, specifically the Amazon show, not the comics, and Guts from Berserk. I'll closely examine how these assaults are portrayed. I'm going to try to focus on that one scene that really is kind of like the center point of what their character development is, if their character development is focused on assault, or at least one character arc is focused on assault. Um, and that would be for Mark, Huey, Guts. Denji is a different story, because Chainsaw Man's whole thing is kind of just Denji being a very vulnerable person. Um, anyway, and how these one scenes develop the character for the audience. More importantly, I'll explore how these scenes and depictions, often trivialized or joked about, or even like completely ignored in discussions, impact real world perspectives or perceptions of male and non traditional sexual assault survivors, discouraging open conversation and reinforcing some stigmas such as, oh, you're a man and you didn't fight back, or you should have liked that, or men being scared to come out because they think people are going to say those things. So, first, we'll talk about Denji. Um, Denji's abuse is kind of masked as fan service in a way. In Chainsaw Man, he's a teenage boy. I believe he's 17 when the series starts, maybe 16. Um, and he's manipulated by women throughout the whole series. Even in the latest manga chapters, he still is being manipulated. Um, in the early chapters, it was power, Makima, Himino, kind of. They use flirtation, sexual favors, and physical dominance to control him. But the way it's portrayed, it seems more to be laughed at than to be sympathized with. Uh, Denji grew up starving, no parents, and had to do a lot of stuff for money, and it is heavily implied that he had to do basically prostitution to survive in some ways. Um, and since he didn't grow up with parents or family and didn't really have affection or social contact, he doesn't know how to reject it. and or deal with it or handle manipulation in the series. And that's the tragedy of Denji's character. He's consent from him is kind of blurred because he's desperate to be loved. Since he's never had to love him besides Puchita, and Puchita is now part of him. And grooming isn't really consent, as he is groomed by Makima and some other characters throughout the story. Yet Denji's pain is constantly brushed off, not just by the narrative and by fans, who treat his experience like a comedic relief or a fantasy, even, which says more about the fan base than it does about Denji. One of the scenes I'll be looking at is Denji and Himeno when they're at the bar and in Himeno's apartment. Himeno's drunk, which is already a lot, so a drunk person hanging with a minor. She then kisses Denji, which there's an age gap there. Also, she's under the influence. Denji didn't give consent. And then she does throw up in Denji's mouth, which then makes the scene more of a comedic relief scene. And then later in the apartment, she's still drunk, and then she's seducing Denji. At the end, Denji says no, but still, he doesn't really know how to react to it because he's never been in the situation, doesn't know how to deal with social contact. It's just a lot. And later on, or throughout, that's just Himeno. For Makima, Makima uses her influence on Denji, knowing that she is an attractive woman, to influence Denji to push himself to find the Gun Devil, or we later find out to be the wind condition for Makima. She'd be like, I'll let you kiss me, I'll let you touch me, I'll let you go on a date with me, so on and so on. And obviously he's going to say yes because he's desperate for love and attention. There's also Power, who said to Denji, this is very early on the story, she was like, if you save my cat, I'll let you touch me. Which he ended up saying, saving the cat, and then they ended up touching. And this is all just kind of portrayed as fan service, not really character arcs or anything there. Well, it is a character arc, it just shows how Denji is a tragedy of a character, of just how circumstance can put you in a terrible position, and that terrible position will be an endless cycle of more terrible and terrible decisions of loss and pain and desperation for love and a place of belonging. Anyway, now we'll talk about Mark Grayson from Invincible. So this is specifically kind of one overarching character arc where Mark gets sexually assaulted by Anissa, the Viltrumite. They were fighting, and she took advantage of it and had her way with him. This might be one of the most jarring examples of male sexual assault in superhero fiction that's not a parody, such as The Boys, and one of the most ignored. In the comics, Anissa, a Viltrumite warrior, assaults Mark in a scene that's violent, humiliating, and disturbing, frankly. She overpowers him completely, mocking his resistance and reducing his pain to weakness. What follows is silence. The comic never really gives Mark a chance to process or even talk about what happened, and fans just made jokes about it, like, that should have been me. I see this one a lot. Mark at this point should have been able to defeat her, so he let it happen. Or, Mark could have easily run away, definitely faster. He let it happen. They're just trying to chop it up to, like, he wanted that because he's a man. Which pushes the narrative more of why he was afraid to come out about it, afraid of being portrayed as weak when he really isn't. A lot of people were also saying, like, how lucky Mark was to be in that position. the kind of reaction doesn't really dismiss a fictional event. It mirrors the real world disbelief male victims face when their assault doesn't match the stereotype. Later on in the story, we see that Mark is even afraid to be touched by his significant other, Adam Eve, and she doesn't know what's wrong because he doesn't want to talk about it. It takes a very long time for Mark to process it, and Mark and Anissa end up having a kid, not together, from the situation. Anissa kept the kid named Marky, who was raised by her Earth husband. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But eventually Mark accepted him as his son, showcasing how he finally, after a very long time, processed the trauma. Now we'll be talking about Guts from Berserk. This one's very dark, very gruesome. As a child, Guts was kind of trained and mentored by Gambino, who he saw as an inspirational figure, and then he ends up being sexually assaulted by Gambino. And this trauma echoes throughout his whole life, throughout the whole manga story. Unlike the other characters in this list, well, specifically Mark, which is just a smaller character arc, this is part of Guts' character. Like, this is Guts. His trauma is what defines him. And what happened to Guts? The fandom is kind of split. Some focus and say that he handles it correctly how a man should, and uses his rage, strength, and masculinity to not let it happen to him again. While this sidelines him still being a victim and putting him on a pedestal of being a badass. It could be shared. He could be a victim while simultaneously being a badass. But other people recognize him for the victim he is, as he is vulnerable, and we see this throughout the story as he kind of opens up to other characters. The male pain is apparently easier to respect when it looks like violence. So like I was saying, he earns respect not through vulnerability, but through revenge in a way. And now we'll talk about Hughie Campbell from The Boys. Specifically, again, the TV show, not the comics. The comics are a whole different thing. So in the TV show, Hughie constantly struggles with power, who has it, who abuses it, and what it takes to take the power back. But in the latest season, came out last summer, when he's undercover in Tech Knight's hidden lair, trying to get information to take the power back, he's disguised in a parody of Spider-Man. Can't remember his name. I think it's Webcrawler. And Tech Knight takes advantage of him, as well as Ashley from Thought. And they do a lot to Hughie. It's layered in satire and is played mostly for laughs. It's satire on superhero culture, kinks, even talks masculinity. But what gets lost is a fact that a main character is being sexually assaulted on screen, and the audience is cute to laugh. Hughie's humiliated. Hughie is humiliated. Hughie feels bad. No one checks in with him. There's no follow-up, no reflection. It's not even acknowledged later on, really. This moment is over as quickly as it starts. So is the conversation. And Hughie is kind of like always in this position of like the underdog getting laughed at because he just doesn't belong here. This isn't his world, in a way. He's kind of thrust in the world, as that's, if you watch the first episode, you know what happened. Like he wasn't put here by choice. This reflects a broader cultural discomfort. When male characters are victimized, especially in funny or absurd ways, audiences are trained to laugh instead of empathize. The writers might hide behind satires, but real survivors don't get to hide. And what Hughie goes through, powerlessness, shame, being laughed at, is the exact experience many male survivors cite as reasons why they never spoke out. So this isn't just an issue in media where stereotypes of male sexual assault characters are portrayed more than victims themselves, at least in the biggest form of media, like most popular media. There's multiple good examples of male survivors of sexual assault in fiction. But in real life, male survivors are less likely to report assault, not because it hurts less, but because the system isn't built to believe them. In the US, according to the CDC, 1 in 6 men have experienced sexual assault or abuse in their lifetime. I'm sure that's not a very common factoid because not a lot of people talk about it. They're afraid of being laughed at, like Huey. They're afraid people say you wanted it, like they do to Denji or Mark, or afraid no one will acknowledge what happened. Or they're afraid that unless their pain turns into rage or revenge, like it, they won't be taken seriously. Sometimes even like hospitals, law enforcement, and crisis centers carry that bias. When male victims are questioned more harshly, their assaults are treated like anomalies. Some are told outright, "This couldn't have happened to you." One key example of this, what happened in real life, is with Terry Crews. Terry Crews was assaulted by some executive, and he came out and admitted it. And then people started making fun of him, such as Charlemagne, 50 Cent. They're saying, "You're a big, strong man, and you let this happen to you." It's easy to say that when you haven't been in that position. People panic. They don't know what to do. And like I was saying about Guts, if your pain isn't turned into rage and revenge, people are going to laugh at you sometimes. Which I don't know when that became the standard, but it is. The way we react to fictional trauma teaches people how to respond to real trauma. If we normalize jokes, erasure, or silence in fiction, we enforce that in real life. If we laugh when a male character is assaulted, we're training ourselves to laugh at men around us who stay quiet about their own trauma. We can't change those stories, but we can change the way we respond to them. We can stop minimizing, we can stop making fun of trauma. We could start listening and start believing. Because for real victims, fiction isn't just fiction. It's a mirror, and it reflects the reality that we live in. My name is Shui. Thank you for watching.